Sam Mays, former Oklahoma State All-American, also himself a part of broadcasting in the Tulsa area. Sam Mays Podcasting Company, host of the Hoover and Mays Show with John, 97.1 in Tulsa, and on Twitter at All-American Mays, M-A-Y-E-S. He joins us on 365 Sports. How impressed were you with the mentality and how Oklahoma State came into Waco and took care of their business?
Oh, I was blown away by it, no question. I would tell you that the Baylor Bears have been the toughest team in the Big 12 probably since about 2017. Always going to hit you all three levels of the defense, receivers block, running backs block, offensive line, one of the most physical you're going to find in the conference. And that's the reason why I picked Oklahoma State to lose that game this weekend, to be completely honest. And almost by the exact same score they won the game by. The most impressive part of the game, bar none, was the line of scrimmage play by the Cowboys. I didn't think they had it in them on the offensive front and the interior in particular. I think Jackson Player and Siaki Ika are NFL players. I think Ika probably a first-round guy. I had no expectation that they were going to be able to move him off the line of scrimmage, and the Cowboy offensive line handled him for about good 3 quarters of football, which is unbelievably impressive. And on the flip side, I would say the interior of their defensive line also shined in that game. I didn't think they were going to have it in them. Baylor's interior offensive line is the real deal, and Oklahoma State dominated play in the line of scrimmage for 4 quarters, which is why they won the game at the end of the day. That was probably one of the best performances I've seen out of Mike Gundy and his football team maybe in a decade. That was an all-time performance to go down there and win in Waco.
Were you unsure of who they were because of who they had played before they came in, and did that change after Saturday?
For sure. And I would have told you that was going to be a significant disadvantage because, you're talking about going a direction of school, Sisters of the Poor, 2 weeks prior to playing Baylor, which is that is the bear, right? That is the monster that's in the Big 12. And to go to Waco and do it, I would have never guessed that they as physical as they were. Even if they got there at some point this season, I would have told you going from Arkansas Pine Bluff to playing Baylor was going to be a real negative for the Cowboys. And I don't know what happened or what was said, but it absolutely was one, it was just an inspiring physical performance. And they kind of came out of nowhere with that. I think this is absolutely we made a statement type of game for Oklahoma State when you consider who Baylor is. I still think Baylor is one of the top 3 teams in this league, along with Kansas State. And so for the Cowboys to beat them the way they did at home is pretty impressive.
Yeah, Sam, I thought it was interesting that, kind of around here, and I'm sure it was somewhat of the same in Stillwater, there was let's not talk about last year. This isn't last year's teams. This isn't, the Big 12. There's some stuff from that lingers, but it's not really what this is about. And then yet by the end of it, it felt like Oklahoma State definitely had a little chip on their shoulder over last year. And Mike Gundy and, Spencer Sanders, I believe it was, said I had a little something out there to prove. So it feels like there was some carryover ultimately.
Did we lose him? Let me check.
All right. Or my question just is terrible.
You guys got me?
Yeah.
There you go. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah. No, I think there was, and it makes sense. If you're Oklahoma State, you look back at that Big 12 championship game and you would rather tell yourself that you lost it versus Baylor beat you, right? 4 turnovers. I mean, you can't find a way to move them on the 1-inch line. And, that seems like more you did that to yourself. So I'm sure that was a focal point through the spring, through the summer. I'm sure that game was on the big board above any other game they've played so far this season. That would have been my focus all through camp would be the Baylor Bears, especially in the offensive and defensive line. The offensive line in particular. I mean, those dudes that looks like an SEC defense down in Waco, and no one's saying enough about it. Everybody's like, oh, why is Dave Aranda winning all these games? I'm like, have you seen the defense? Have you seen them? Just watch them get off the bus. That's why he's winning all these games. So they focused and they dialed in and they had an excellent game plan and they executed. I mean, that was an excellent high level football game. I'm not looking at Baylor and thinking, oh, they played like crap. I'm thinking Oklahoma State just played better, beat a really good football team. It was a hell of a win.
157 yards and hidden yardage on kick returns. Gundy brought that up. I tell you what I saw as well, Sam, and you talked about the line of scrimmage. Oklahoma State, Sanders had a couple of longer runs more with his great legs and the ability for him to get away. But even it was the 3 and 4 yarders. It was like the way Richardson and the other name escapes me, how they just ran angry and physical, even if it was a 2 or 3 yard run when they needed 1 or 2 yards. Did you get that same impression?
100%. And, Sanders has really kind of, this has always been a really good football player playing quarterback, right? That's kind of been who he has been. Kind of like Jalen Hurts before this season. Like just really good athletes, best player in their team their whole life. He's a really good football player playing quarterback. Now he looks like a quarterback, right? And so he's doing the little things right in the passing game. He's putting attention to detail in the short yardage plays. And when he runs with purpose, and he doesn't take a bunch of shots. Like that kid has taken a huge step in the right direction as far as his ability to be clutch. Like not every play needs to be a 40-yard deep ball, but on 3rd and 6, and we're calling a quick slant, and we need you to be on the money with this ball against a talented Baylor secondary, and they call that play, and you execute that, or you find a way to scramble and give them 6 tough yards where you don't die. That's all positive, and those are all decisions that a year ago he struggled with making, right? And frankly, I don't think Gundy really gave him the confidence to do some of those things. Like I don't never really feel like Gundy gave him the keys to the kingdom, you might say. And I feel like this season's been completely different in the level of trust that he's going to make the right decision.
Sam Mays, former Oklahoma State All-American, a part of Tulsa Media, covers Oklahoma State, with us on 365 Sports.
Sam, what does the rest of the league make you feel nervous? This is not a league where there's a gimme. I mean, I know West Virginia is probably at the bottom of the rung right now, but honestly, that's not really that far down the ladder.
No, look, let me tell you something. So I was blown away last week by just the level of play that we are seeing around the country. So I got my old Phil Steele magazine out, and I started going through all the Big 12 teams to see what the ages of their offensive lines were, because that's the thing that sticks out the most, right? And isn't it only Texas and Kansas are really the only 2 teams that have had underclassmen, period. Every other offensive line in this league is senior laden, veteran laden, NFL guys, K-State, Baylor, Iowa State, Oklahoma State. Kansas is probably the youngest line in the league, and their center might be a first rounder one day. I don't know if y'all watch that kid play. He's incredible. Like, I don't know where they found him, where they pulled him out of, but that kid is a monster that's playing in the middle of that offensive line. And I will always tell you, I've never seen a bad team with a good offensive line, period. It doesn't exist. Because if you can stay on the field as an offense, even if your defense sucks, you'll be okay, right? If you can stay in the field for 8 plays and not score points, that's a small victory if you're Kansas State or if you're Iowa State, if you're one of these teams that wants to really muck it up, make it dirty, play a physical game of football. So this league has just got a bunch of badass offensive lines, and I think we're going to get some high-level play from the beginning and to the end. And frankly, if you look at the Big Ten right now, I would really put in a big argument that the Big 12 is the better conference, to be honest with you. I think it's the second best conference in college football.
Sam, what have your impressions been of Derek Mason thus far?
I think it was a bit of a slow start. I think the thing that made the previous regime so good was his ability to adjust on the fly in game. Like they had this ability to, and I think a lot of that is, I mean, you got a couple of NFL guys playing linebacker, another one playing safety. Of course, it's easy to filter information to those 3 and then have them filter it to the rest of the defense. So, like, I think that they were missing that conduit. They were missing that connection between DC and the defense early in the season. I think they've gotten more time together on the sidelines and making those adjustments and going into halftime with each other. And then, I would have said the bye week was a negative for the offense, but maybe a positive for the defense, because now you get an extra week to go ahead and work on some things that maybe you have been delayed in installation because you hadn't been happy with the original product that you're getting in games 1 and 2. So it was a slow start, but I think that, look, you got to give him a lot of credit for what he was able to do in this game against Baylor. Like, that was a great game plan coming in, and clearly those kids executed. And the thing that I really appreciate is they survived the halftime, because I think Dave Aranda is one of the best halftime coaches that we have in this league, along with Chris Lyman. And so he's going to get you at half. He's going to figure something out and made it hard for you to do something on offense and on defense. And both sides of the ball survived that halftime there for Oklahoma State, which was impressive. So I think he's just kind of getting started. I think the defense will grow as the season goes along, but so far so good by Coach Mason.
You can't see what we have on the screen, but we have a text here. Garrett, can you put it up from one of our listeners? Oh, I cannot read. That's way too small. Holy moly.
When Sam Mays gets on.
Yeah, when Sam Mays gets on, tell him he needs to start his own OK State podcast. We don't have any good ones and need some competition for the 365 Sports, which, by the way, is us.
Oh, that's awesome. I've been approached with that this season. I think I might put something together for next year.
JR Patriot, by the way, is the one that put that up there. But you have your own podcast, and it's really, really good. And I obviously saw you at Big 12 Media Days. Here's a question from our chat room. How come and how, and of course fans feel this way, but how, if you look at Oklahoma State and who they've beaten, can they be ranked behind Michigan based on who Michigan has played so far this year?
Oh, man, that's all the brand, right? I mean, it sucks that it's a true statement, but that's just kind of the reality of the situation. You know, there's been moments where Baylor's been ranked in the top 10 behind Oklahoma by 3 spots, and I would have told you that Baylor was twice the team that Oklahoma was from a physical standpoint. But Baylor doesn't have the brand, right? That they're continuing to build that brand with great fan participation. That new stadium is fantastic. They've got NFL players left and right. Baylor's getting there and will be one of the featured programs in the Big 12 moving forward. But, you know, they just don't have the same brand that an Oklahoma does or that a Michigan does. Michigan is one of those schools that when they're good, college football is better, along with USC and Florida State and Penn State and Ohio State. When you get these big, you know, infamous brands in college football that are getting it done at a high level, the powers that be want to see them have success. So it sucks, but at the end of the day, all Oklahoma State's got to do is win out, and which would be incredible. And let me tell you something, it'll be the first year in this playoffs format that I don't think anybody can complain about the resume. You went out in the Big 12 this year, boys, you've done something pretty spectacular, and Oklahoma State will get an easy path to the college football playoff.
Well, to do that, Sam, they've got to win this weekend. They'll be back at home in a nice Saturday afternoon once again. But have you been able to watch much Texas Tech? They've had quite the interesting season, and they're kind of hard to put away. What do you think about that matchup coming up on Saturday?
Let me tell you something. I love a good football coach now, and I love one that wins the hearts and minds early, right? So, like, when you looked at Aranda did it in Waco. Like, I don't know how he did it, but within the first 4 games of his first season, he had won the hearts and minds. Those kids were playing for him because they trusted him. Joey McGuire, the best film you'll see at Texas Tech is of him addressing his team. Makes the hair on the back stand up on my neck. Like, he's got them. There's nothing but eye contact. The whole room is still. The water people aren't moving. The training staff isn't moving. He's got them so focused on the words coming out of his mouth, building that foundation of that program. Those kids are going to play hard for him. They might not be the best team in the league athletically, but I promise you, every time they strap a chin strap up, Tech is going to bring it. Absolutely. With a roster full of Texas kids, with a Texas coach, and you know he's down there championing that narrative 100%. So I like Tech, and I like the test that they are for Oklahoma State. It'll really test Oklahoma State and how focused they are on doing it, the detail work, every single time out, every single game out. Like, you're not good enough to overlook anybody. And the second they start believing that, the second they start losing games. So as long as they go in with the same mentality that they had against Baylor, Oklahoma State will win this game by double digits.
Sam, last question for you. From me, thank you for your time today, as always. Texas and OU play in Dallas. We know the history there. Both teams are unranked. That hasn't happened since 1998, or at least one of the others been ranked. But it's kind of it's a game, and maybe the winner gets some adrenaline from it. Perhaps it seems like Oklahoma right now just needs a game where they bounce back. I don't know how they can. Do you? What did you see Saturday when they played and were beaten up by the way they were by TCU?
So to tell the story of Oklahoma defensively, you have to go back and acknowledge that Alex Grinch's defense, now the current defensive coordinator at USC, it is, you could draw it up with crayons. Like, it is as simple as it gets, and essentially it's run completely from the sidelines. So what you do is you take a bunch of kids, you put them on the field, and you teach them effort, and you tell them, just do what I'm telling you to do, and we'll get you to the football. And so on a really bad defense, that stuff works early, no question, but it's hard to develop that. It's hard to make that any better than what it is. Venables comes in with a defense that is as complicated as any you're going to find in this game. He ran it at Clemson. He's had nothing but success. He's one of the leaders in sacks over the last 10 years, et cetera, et cetera. We all know what he is. But to make that transition it takes longer than 11 weeks, essentially, which is all you've got. You've got a couple of weeks of the bowl game. You got 4 weeks in the spring. You got 4 weeks in the fall. Like that, you're not changing that. Those kids aren't learning everything about that defense yet. And so much of it is pre-snap, right? So your pre-snap read of the offense, your pre-snap read of your own defense. Are you lined up? Is your buddy lined up? Is the defensive line lined up? At one point they had 3 down linemen. Tight end was out to the left. The kid I guess he was a defensive end. He lined up as a 3 technique. So on the left side of the line, guys, there was nothing but a corner, right? A 3 technique, and who was covered up by a tight end and a tackle. And I'm sitting there watching it going, how does no one on the defense look over there and think, oh, that ain't right? Something is not right there. Like, and even just call a timeout because something is not right there. But instead, everybody's so worried about what they're doing and making a mistake, they let that play go. And next thing you know, it's a 67-yard scramble. And I'm sure TCU is literally laughing on the sideline. Like, what are y'all doing? So, like, there's 28 points that were scored in that game solely made on alignment mistakes for Oklahoma. So if you just get lined up correctly, you're most likely not going to give up 28 points in that game. Right? Like so I would tell you that a drastic improvement is probably in the horizon somewhere because God knows they can't be that bad for long. Right? Like eventually somebody's going to figure out where to line up correctly in the defense. It was the worst performance I've ever seen out of that team ever. In my 22 years living in Oklahoma, I've never seen them play such bad football.
Yeah, Sam, when Matt Rule came here, he kind of talked about Phil Snow's defense and how hard it was to learn. Once they got it, you saw it, they got it. And then Dave Aranda comes in and they've carried that on with Ron Roberts. But yeah, if it's complicated, you can't just expect, especially kids who might be 19 and their defense in high school was kind of similar of, hey, come closer over here to cover this guy. Like it's completely different.
Right. Absolutely. Like it's a struggle. And that's, I think what we're seeing more than anything is just confusion, which leads to slow play and slow reaction. You guys know the story. So I would expect Oklahoma's defense to get better at some point in the next couple of weeks. Will they be good enough to beat Texas this weekend? They'll be improved. I think this is a better game than people think it's going to be, but I think it's going to be a tough one for them to win. But I think, week 7, going into week 8, I think they should at some point look like a real football team, but I don't know what everybody expected. This makes sense to me. They lost a bunch of NFL players off that defense last year, right? 4 or 5 of them. Like you lose all that talent. You got a bunch of new kids playing. You got a brand new coach with a brand new scheme. I know everybody wants to believe Oklahoma is impervious to rebuilding, but the reality is nobody is. Saban won 7 games in his first year at Alabama, right? Like we have the sky is falling mentality up here in Oklahoma City, and it's like y'all need to settle down a little bit and give this coach a chance to do his job.
Yeah, that's what happens when you have basically 20-plus years of just, 8 wins or more and conference titles seemingly every year. It's just
right. Now, let me look. We all love it, though, right? Let's be honest, okay? I mean, every one of us. Like, part of me, as I'm covering the team as a former Oklahoma State Cowboy, I'm down there going, I hope they scored 90 points on this team right now. Just out of revenge factor for the rest of the conference. Because you're right, all they've done is dominate for 20 years.
Sam, thank you very much. Craig, anything else for Sam? Sam Mays, former Oklahoma State All-American, part of the radio show Sam Mays podcast as well. Even some of you want him to do more with the Big 12, and he does a great job. Sam, thanks for your time, and have a great week. That's Sam Mays with us on 365 Sports. When we come back.